Hey there, authors. Welcome back to the Prolific Author Podcast. How's everyone doing this week? I hope you've had a great week of writing. So I have a really fun interview for you today with author Connie B. Dowell. She is not only an author, she is also a freelance editor. So she's got some really great information for us on what to look for in an editor, what some red flags might be, different types of editing that you might consider. Welcome to the Prolific Author Podcast. Let's face it, readers read fiction to feel emotion and be transported and transformed. In this ongoing digital revolution, where online marketing is always in flux, the only way to create a sustainable author business and live off your royalties is to write transformational stories, market at every stage of the author journey, and cultivate a loyal audience of readers. Fortunately, there's never been more opportunity to make a living as a fiction author. Hi, I'm Liesl Hill, USA Today bestselling author and story clarity coach. When I'm not dictating my own stories about dragons, serial killers, and dystopian worlds, I help other authors write their own transformational fiction, position them as bestsellers, and market them like pros. Join me on the podcast where I give writing tips, marketing how-tos, story advice, and interviews with other authors who are in the trenches just like you and making it work. We are prolific authors. But before we get to that, do you need clarity on your work in progress on whatever manuscript you are currently writing? Do you want to know that you've included all of the necessary points in your story to make sure that your readers connect with it on a deep emotional level, and that way they will keep coming back to you for stories because you have changed them in some way? That is the only way to build a sustainable author business. So if you would like to get this clarity, book a power hour call with me, and I will help you get clarity on your story, where you need to go, where you need to be, so that you can start growing a sustainable author business. Book that call at bit.ly/power hour 97. Beyond that, let's see. I have been doing lots of interviews this week. I actually did a lot of recording today, so I'm a little exhausted, but that's okay. I got a lot of work done. I have finally, I believe, finished that, the project I've been working on, talking about for like a month, the email templates. So it's finished, but it hasn't been uploaded yet. I have to actually kind of get it onto the site so that it can be downloaded. But in the next few days, that will be done, and I will be really relieved to finally have that done. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all that I have for today. So let's just hop right into the interview with Connie.
All right. So we are here today with Connie B. Dowell, who is an author. How are you doing today, Connie?
Doing great. How are you doing, Lisa?
Good, good. Thanks for coming on to talk to us today. Why don't we start by just have you introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you write.
Hi. Well, I am Connie B. Dowell. I am an author and a freelance editor, and I write mostly mystery. That's what I've published so far, but I've got some children's lit plans in the future, as well
Nice.
as some nonfiction for authors.
Good. Good for you. And the mystery, is it like cozy, or is it more dark and gritty?
Oh, it's very cozy.
Cozy. Okay.
Some modern, some historical.
Nice. Oh, that's fun. That's fun. And how did you get into writing? Tell us a little bit about your journey. How'd you get here?
Well, I've written pretty much as soon as I knew what stories were, according to my mother. I was the kid who was always asking for paper and pencils and crayons and staplers to make my own little books. And to date myself here, if I felt particularly proud of my work, I would go through and individually rip off the dot matrix siding of the pages.
Nice. Yeah, some of our listeners probably won't know what that is, but others will.
Yeah.
How fun. And then did you hop right into this as a career as an adult, or was there a little bit more of a process than that?
There was a bit more of a process because I did have a sense early on that I needed to practice and learn for a good long time. And I tried to kind of figure out what I wanted as a day job while I was still working on my writing. I dropped out of law school at one point, which was at least good for story fodder, if nothing else.
For sure.
Yes, I worked as a library assistant for a while, but I came back to my love of writing through working in university writing centers. Before, that's what I did before I jumped into writing and editing as my main gig.
Oh, okay. Great, great. And so what is your process? How do you go about getting your books written?
So my process has changed a lot over time, and I think
Okay.
that's pretty common for most writers.
Sure.
I like a lot of folks, I started really as a pantser and realized pretty quickly that I could not finish a draft if I did not have any kind of plan, which led to a lot of studying craft and studying outlining, and how all of that worked. And then I became a pretty intense outliner. And now I'm something a little bit of both. I have a general plan most of the time, but I can wing, the more books I write, the more I'm able to wing it. And I'm actually finishing up a book where I decided, okay, here is the overall game plan, but I don't know who the killer is. And I'm going to write all these suspects as if they did it. And slowly, as I write, winnow out who the killer really is.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's a really interesting approach to write every single, I mean, specifically for mystery. I don't know that this would necessarily apply to other genres, but it's, specifically if you're writing a mystery, to write every single character as though they might be the killer or the bad guy, because that kind of automatically makes them red herrings. So that's kind of fun. I haven't heard that before.
Yeah, it's something that I've heard a couple of other mystery authors doing, and it always kind of intimidated me until I got a little further along. Obviously, you can't write every single character like that, or it would be way too many suspects, but you can pick a handful and say, okay, it's one of these people, but right. I don't know who.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great tip. So can I assume your process changed a little bit around having children then?
Definitely. The doubling down on the planning and getting more experience helped a lot with having children underfoot, because it's much harder to pants and to not know where you're going when you've got chaos already going around you. It's something that you can easily control. You can control your plan for your own books, even when you can't control your children's behavior. But in terms of like actually getting the work done, the process changed a lot more, because I had to be very careful with my time. I leaned in hard to writing sprints, to pre-writing a scene, and I still do this even though I'm semi-pantsing my current work in progress, is that before I write a scene, I will kind of generally sketch out where it's going. And that allows me to write faster. It also helps if you do any dictation, because man, not knowing where you're going and having a recording, having the mic in front of you is kind of nerve-wracking. But I find it's much easier to dictate when I have a general idea of where the scene's going. Yeah,
for sure. And so do you dictate? How much of your writing do you dictate?
It's really varied a lot. I leaned into almost 100% dictation for a long time. The last book I published, I backed off completely because I got tired of correcting everything. It was just too much to clean up. But now this one, I'm kind of doing maybe half and half.
Gotcha. Yeah, I do dictation too, so I'm always curious about how other authors use it and what they do with it.
Yeah, it's a trade-off because it's so much faster, at least for me, than using my hands, but the accuracy is just not there. So there's a lot more cleanup.
Yeah, that's what I find too. There's kind of an extra step because you have to edit the transcription, but overall I use it almost 100%, because even with editing the transcription, I just find that it's still faster for me. But yeah, I know what you mean. It's a whole other skill to acquire to have to do that, and it can be just as frustrating as regular writing at times.
I can.
All right, so let's switch gears a little bit and talk about your editing. How did you come to be a freelance editor?
Well, I started while I was working in a university writing center. I had a colleague who was a freelance editor, and I kind of piqued my interest as something like maybe I could do on the side. And so I took my training from Writing Center work, and I took an extra kind of course or two to shore up my knowledge, and then I started doing that just here and there in 2013. And for a long time it was here and there, with a big gap while my children were very, very small, because I could eventually I realized, okay, I can write or edit and parent, but I couldn't do all three while having two babies.
Right.
It just was a little too much at that point. But now that they are older, starting about a year ago, I reopened my doors for editing clients, and I'm now editing pretty consistently.
Good. Have you found an uptick in people who are needing editing during Corona, especially? I know there's a lot of things that have gone online. So have you found your business has gone up?
I'm not sure if it's affected by Corona or if it's been affected by the cumulative effects of a year of marketing. So it's hard to make that judgment call.
Yeah, I hear you. So what tips would you give to writers who need to find editors? You know, what are your tips for finding and acquiring a good editor?
So it's important to understand the different levels of editing, and what you're expecting and what your editor is providing, to understand what these services are. So the biggest difference would be developmental editing versus those later stages of editing. Developmental editing is big picture stuff. You're looking for feedback on story, on character development, on all those big things that would require big rewrites. That's why it's a level 1 edit. It's something you don't want to do after you've had a copy edit, because then you've just undone all the work that was done, because you might have to go back and rewrite large portions. Yeah. So that is the one half of the split. The other half would be things like copy edits or line edits. Different editors define those differently, but a lot of times, for me, they are one service, but it's important to kind of look at exactly what's being provided. When someone says copy edit or line edit or proofread, are they going to be looking at the structure of your sentences? Are they going to be double checking any facts that seem weird? Or are they looking for grammar, or are they just looking for typos? Because understanding what they're providing is important to getting the result that you want back.
Right.
That's kind of the number one thing, is to understand what this editor, because if you come into it, and I've heard of clients, I've had clients come to me who they got a copy edit, but they didn't understand what copy edit meant. And so they're like, but the editor never provided me any suggestions on how to organize this, and all of my beta readers are saying this needs better organization, that my thoughts are scattered, but the editor didn't do any of that. And I'm like, well, probably because they said, sure, I'll give you a copy edit, and there was a miscommunication. So that's the first thing, is to understand what kind of editing you're looking for, and what kind of editing that the service provider is actually providing. Yeah.
So definitely communication with the editor is big.
Yeah, it's big. I'd also look at testimonials, and I would ask, if you have a long work, if you have a novel length work, ask for a sample edit. That's very common to do. It's something that I do with any novel length work. Obviously, it's not as super possible to do like 1,000-word sample on a picture book edit, because that would be the whole picture book. But for a novel length work, that's something that it is pretty common, and might actually be a little bit of a red flag if they won't do that.
Okay, yeah, good to know. So do you offer all the different levels of editing?
Yeah, but I offer developmental, and copy editing, and on request, proofreading is not something that I pursue as much, and haven't had as much request for it, but I do offer all the different levels.
So this is just kind of a personal inquiry for me. How do you get a lot of people? Do you get a pretty even split with what people want and are willing to pay for? Do you have just as many people asking for developmental as copy editing, or do you find that it leans one way or the other?
And it's hard to judge exactly why this is, because it's hard to know whether it's due to demand or it's due to what I best know how to have learned how to market. But copy editing is my bread and butter.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if that's because there's a higher demand for copy editing or if it's because I'm better at reaching copy editing clients.
Yeah. And I think it could be a little bit of both. I've noticed that authors, they tend to push back a little bit sometimes on developmental editing. They feel like they kind of know how to do that. And a lot of them don't, but they think they do. You know? So that's why I was wondering if you get as much developmental editing. And I think when people think of editing, a lot of times they don't think of storycraft. They're only thinking of typos and sentence structure and things like that. So that could be why too. But that's really interesting. Well, you talked about them not wanting to, a red flag if they don't want to do a sample edit for you. Are there any other red flags that people should look for when looking for an editor?
Yeah, I'd say some red flags, and I don't want to call out like newer editors who don't have lots of testimonials, but that if they're newer, then their price should be a little bit lower, and they should definitely be willing to do a sample so you could get that judge of their abilities. But yeah, if they don't have any testimonials, they won't do a sample, they don't have that much experience, that's something to kind of look out for. You can also just kind of do some searches. There are places like Predators and Editors or Writer Beware. I haven't actually seen that much on either of those two organizations / sites about unscrupulous freelance editors or something. But you can check it out. You can check out that person and see if people are saying, oh, they took my money and ran. But which actually brings me to a red flag, is that nobody should be asking for you to Venmo them any money or doing PayPal now PayPal can be legit, but PayPal as friends and family, because that means they're trying not to pay PayPal to handle their transaction, and that's super sketchy. It's either super sketchy or it's an indication that they don't understand the business,
right?
Which is also a red flag.
So how do you then, so that people kind of have an idea what to look for? What platform do you use to do the transaction with your clients? Is it just Facebook, or I would imagine something like Stripe, or like what kinds of platforms should they be looking for from legit editors?
I actually did used to use PayPal. PayPal is used by legitimate businesses. I don't want to badmouth PayPal, and as long as they are treating it like a business and not asking for a friends and family transfer. I currently use Agree to handle both contracts and payments, and I'm pretty new to being with them. I've been happy with it so far, but yeah, it just eliminates a little bit extra paperwork.
Nice. Great. So what are your then plans for the future? You continue to write and edit, or do you have anything, big projects that you're excited about on the horizon?
I have big plans way down the road, but for now, keep writing, keep editing, and doubling down on those parts of my business. And actually, as a word of advice to people who are writing with very small kids or are starting a business with very small kids around, there's lots of stuff that you could do to make it easier on yourself, and I list them in my free ebook, Writing Without Childcare. But another thing that I'm listening to my own advice in this one. Eventually, you'll hit a growth ceiling, and if at all possible, you can get some childcare. do it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Eventually you'll get to a point where you can't grow your writing output anymore. You can't grow your business anymore
Right.
without a little bit of relief. And that's actually where I'm at right now. So looking
Yeah, I
forward
think that's one thing that a lot of authors kind of have to learn. Because it's not even an author thing per se, it's an entrepreneur thing. You know, you have to be willing to pay people to help you out because you always hit that growth ceiling. So whether that's getting childcare or getting a housekeeper or even just paying a VA to help you do some of your, author tasks, that's something that I think that's good advice. People need to, if they want to grow their business, they need to be willing to
yeah.
kind of open their mind and take that into account. So yeah, very wise words.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be like as big of a step as you might be. Like when I thought about, okay, now I'm thinking about hiring a part-time nanny. Gee, it's gonna have to be like 20 hours a week, and how much? No, like maybe if it's like too unreasonable of a step, but you feel like you're at a growth ceiling, see if you can move that step down a little bit. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I thought about how much money I want to have in the bank before I hired somebody at 9 hours a week, I was like, oh, that's doable.
Mm-hmm.
That's doable, and it would give me 9 extra hours.
Right, for sure. So because, we're on the Prolific Author podcast, what do you do, which you might have already answered this, and that's fine, but what do you do to help yourself be more prolific in your writing?
Sprints are like the biggest thing. Writing sprints are the biggest thing. And I love a program called Write or Die. Are you familiar with that one?
I'm not. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's available as a web app, and there's also a desktop app that I think is pretty low cost. Last I checked, maybe like $40 or something. But it's a program you type before you start typing your words in, you set how long you want to write, how many words you're going to write, and a difficulty level. And the difficulty level will determine the consequences if you stop writing for too long. So you're typing away, and if you pause too long, on the lower settings, you might get a flashing red screen, some annoying noises. On like the hardest setting, it'll start eating your words.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So talk about motivation to keep going.
Yeah, no kidding. That's awesome. I'll look that up, and I'll try to link to it in the show notes so that people can check it out if they want. But it's also kind of fun if you can kind of make it into a competition with yourself or a game. Then it's more enjoyable than sitting around feeling like, oh, I didn't get my words done, or you know what I mean. So I think I would encourage something like that. I think that's fun. All right. Well, hey, thanks so much for coming to talk to us on the podcast today. Do you have any last minute advice you want to dispense or words for aspiring writers?
Yeah, I'd just say that in terms of writing achievements and productivity, like you are your own benchmark. Never compare yourself to what other people are doing. Don't think, oh, I can't write as much as this person, I can't achieve as much as this person, so I'm not a real writer. If you can, I mean, you are like a solo runner. You're just trying to beat your own best time. And
yeah,
what I
really like that. You are your own benchmark. That's great. So you have a podcast as well, a writing podcast. Why don't you tell us about that?
I do. I have a writing podcast called Book Echoes, and it's about half interviews with folks on different aspects of writing, publishing, marketing, living the creative life, etc. Interspersed some tips episodes, which are a little bit shorter. And you can find that at bookechoes.com.
Great. And where else can people find you and your books?
You can find my mystery book site, which needs an update, at ConnieBDowell.com. Books are on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, other places you find books, pretty much.
All the retailers? Great.
Retailers, so.
All right. Well, everybody go and check out Connie's books and her podcast. And thank you again so much for talking with us today, Connie.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Sure thing. Best of luck with your writing.
Me again. Before you go, if you found value in this episode, I would love it if you could leave me a review. Reviews are the best way to show your appreciation and help others find this podcast. Be sure to screenshot it, share it on your favorite social media network, and tag me at LK Hill Books. Remember, the world needs your stories. Only you can change someone's heart with your fire-breathing dragons, your mind-blowing mysteries, your epic romances, and your intense thrillers. So join the revolution and be a prolific author.